you as a person, the British military has its swords and horses, but you still want, as a peasant with a pitchfork, to try to get that grain off the road 100% of the time. Not a lot of people talk about this. Desperate people do desperate things. Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output. But very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time: cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne.
Welcome to 420 TV. I have a guest here, David DuByne from Adapt 2030. He's got his own YouTube channel with about 90,000 people. And I recently saw that you got on the David Knight show. I was watching it and I was kind of tickled a little bit to see you on there after watching you at LeakCon. You went over some really good points there, and I wanted to get into what you were talking about with urban farming. What should we expect? Because it's pretty obvious that the grid failure is a big thing that's not only possible, but it's already happening in places. For whatever reason, they haven't upgraded infrastructure knowing that things like the grand solar minimum are coming. And then also food shortages. And I've been talking a lot about that on my channel. And welcome, David DuByne. I appreciate having you come on 420 TV.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here so we can chat about a few issues, because the people that are listening to you are the ones who care about these issues. And that's the voices or the ears that I want to talk to, because, we're in this together and the things are changing so fast now. It's very pronounced, all these changes, that if you don't see them happening, I guess your head's in the sand as an ostrich would be, because there's so much going on so fast. It seems there's a concerted effort by government to cover it up. And I personally feel that's to, A, to avoid the panic, and B, to keep the, economic system floating so there can continually be a just-in-time delivery system that functions correctly, so there's no bottlenecks for governments that are preparing for continuity of government, so they can continue to buy while they keep you in the dark.
The food prices, even in places, the bigger cities that have better distribution, I noticed even when you go into places like that, they're already having lack of goods or lack of choices. Like say you were somebody that tried to eat organic, it's becoming more and more difficult to find enough different varieties of food to put together, and then the cost on top of that. And then when you really know about it, you know that these foods are depleted as well. They may not have all the glyphosate, but you're not getting much nutritional value.
Take a look at Veg Ready. I don't know if you're familiar with Veg Ready. It's VEGREADY.com. Right it there in the front when you go to their website. It's a subscription meal service. They're saying after they've already cut the subscription because they just can't get enough food for anybody. So if you had a subscription with them to have your meals delivered, they have cut the subscription service. And they talk about the shortages right there. Veg Ready's out of saleable inventory. All monthly subscriptions were stopped. Why is it that we're seeing the same things? Walmart, they have their own vertical chain there. They own the farms that produce the food that then go into Walmart, but they're experiencing shortages. And then we have here another company, multi-million-dollar company, Veg Ready. They have also agreements with farms that produce just for them, yet they're unable to get enough to continue their meal-based plans. Now, this is a plant-based meal plan. You look at it as quinoa and lentils and, these kind of proteins from beans and other source, no meat. Why do they not have access to food to keep their multi-million-dollar company going? They have the money to buy it. Why can't they get it?
I mean, obviously, there's a lot of crop problems, even here in the U.S., where they have a lot of flooding this year. There was late freezes. But another thing is the meat markets. I've been paying attention to pork, chicken, things like that are having a lot of problems with diseases like swine flu, swine Ebola, and then you have all the problems with the poultry industry that people don't realize that their food can just stop at any time. And I remember watching Des Moines, Iowa Pork Fest. I guess it's a conference or something with pork farmers. But anyway, they were talking about these diseases, and overnight I saw the stocks of everything go up because all of the food was about to become more expensive, and it did reflect that right away in the supermarket.
Now, what if you're on a fixed income or you're relying on government assistance to feed a family and you can't afford your food anymore? Then what? And see, this is where we get into the whole cascading domino feedback loop. What are these people that can't afford their food? What are they going to do? Do you think they're going to sit idly by and just hang out in their house and say, well, we can't eat today, it's cool? No way. They're going to go out and protest and start to become an angry mob on the street, literally.
Yeah, it's it makes you wonder about, all of the entertainment that's been pushing us towards that idea of hordes of zombies, which are representations of hungry, needy people willing to do anything to take what you have. And so that's a good point. I wanted to ask you about this specifically because I heard you talking on the David Knight show about how a lot of these empty buildings, like from malls and other things that have gone out of business in relation to things like Walmart and internet sales. So there's these massive storage buildings and retail buildings that are just pretty much empty. How would you get those buildings up growing food with masses of people that in the short term won't wait?
This is a conundrum. And also you have to realize that even if we retrofitted every single shopping mall in America, every single parking garage that exists, every single storage facility, it would fall far short of satiating all the need that we would have out there. So as we do move forward here, it is going to be a precarious time. Are you either prepared now or you're not prepared? And how do you defend these? And I don't have the answer because at some point, I'm not willing to put a trigger on hungry people coming to get food, but I know there are others who would. I really believe that we're going to have to start defending our warehouses for food storage, just like they did in the 1600s. Because when you look at the grain deliveries, 100% of grain deliveries from 1640s to 1670s were accompanied by the British military, and they came under attack 100% of the time. The grain deliveries going down the road went by wagon back then. There was no train in the 1600s.
Yeah.
They went by wagon delivery, and they were attacked 100% of the time. So imagine that. You as a person, the British military has its swords and horses and everything, but you still want, as a peasant with a pitchfork, to try to get that grain off the road 100% of the time. Not a lot of people talk about this. Desperate people do desperate things. And if I knew where the storage facility was for all the food coming into your city on a rail line, I would be going there first. So, a lot of these things are going to need protection.
Yeah, absolutely. And then not only that, you were talking about these vertical gardens, which was actually thinking about that. That seems like kind of the answer to the question that I just asked, at least on the small scale for people, if they can hide square footage vertically of growing food. A lot of people wouldn't know it was there because they're looking for people farming out in the open.
Yeah, that's true. If you go to the website called Taiwan Hydro Lush, HYDRO Lush, they have some examples there of what they've done on the rooftops. Because again, rooftops are pretty easily defendable. If you have a rooftop, you're going to be, especially, if it's in a high rise somewhere that's more than 3 or 4 floors off the ground. Bringing it indoors, all you'd have to do is hide the light source, and they wouldn't be able to see that you were growing anything. Now, the thing you'll need to worry about growing indoors is the ventilation and the fungus and mold problems that would be there. So dehumidifiers, you might need a little bit of extra electricity to be running the water pumps, the dehumidifier, the lights, and the fans. But once you get that tweaked, if you will, or dialed in there, now how many indoor grow facilities are there around our planet? Like a lot. So it's not impossible. All you have to do is replicate it. The website you might want to check out here with some real examples is Taiwan Hydro Lush, HYDRO LUSH. These are the guys who supply me with my vertical grow unit that I have out on my balcony. And it's 8 tubes. Hydro Lush, and it comes from Taiwan. So I think you have to put in Taiwan Hydro Lush, but you'll probably find it there.
Check that out. There's a lot of people that's been doing guerrilla farming for a long time. that have kind of got the, experience for this stuff. And now that more and more states are allowing it to become legal, I see this type of farming being easily converted over to food. I mean, because, so many people have been doing it for money, just straight money. And you were talking about how in the short-term future, it's likely that food will be the main source of monetary system. I mean, you'll either have the government, whatever they have going on, or you can trade in real foods, and foods will become the money.
Again, if you're thinking about prosperity during these times, a lot of things are going to dry up just economically because you're going to spend more on this, that, and the other. But if you were able to retrofit, imagine if you were a guerrilla grower and you have the skill set to outfit these kind of tube systems, or you have the skills to set up a hydroponic system indoors. I mean, your skill set is going to be worth gold itself. Because if you're able to produce that right there on your screen, an edible something, yeah, and your family's going to die if you don't get that, or your children are going to starve to death if they don't get that. What is your value at that point?
Yeah, exactly. And I know I watch the Oppenheimer Ranch project a lot, and they're always talking about, are you farming? And really, I don't know anyone that's not a commercial farmer in my area that's doing any kind of farming or anything like they used to do, like my grandparents used to do, and just jar a bunch of food for the future or oil a bunch of eggs, and stock back on food. No one's doing that right now. So we're going to have massive populations of hungry, desperate people looking for something to eat. And with that, I wanted to get into, for people that don't understand what the grand solar minimum is and what kind of scenarios weather-wise could we be looking at in the next 50 years?
Well, if I could flip the question back at you, because sharing the information is kind of where we're at right now. So if I could ask, what do you think, what is the grand solar minimum? I mean, you've been around this whole crowd enough, and you're at LeakCon taking all the photos there, chatting with everybody, and Diamond and Rex and those guys. So in your own opinion, can you explain it to me or explain it to others what you think or what you believe or what you know is a grand solar minimum? Because it's just like this. One person talks to the next person, that talks to the next person, that talks to the next person. So,
yeah, well, I'm no scientist, but, when I was a kid, I used to read stuff like Omni and National Geographics. And when I was a kid, they were talking about global cooling and things like the grand solar minimum, about increased particles, and people weren't scared to say that the sun's relationship with the weather, earthquakes, and cloud nucleation is all together. I'm one of those weird people to ask questions. So, you pile on a bunch of global warming stuff about my SUV and cows farting. I'm the kind of person that questions that. So right away, I'm thinking, at the end of the Ice Age, I don't think there was a large number of cavemen driving around in their, SUVs tearing up stuff. And then that's why the ice caps melted. So I know that the weather goes in cycles, and I studied a lot about dinosaurs and everything. And I know that the Earth actually has the least amount of carbon dioxide in its history, or at least as far as we know. So I've always known that. And I'm expecting extreme weather. People have been talking about climate change. In my opinion, it's just been a scam to get money so that they can prepare, and set up a scenario where that they are still in power when, things like we may possibly have a mini ice age, or we may have droughts in areas, with the magnetic poles moving. To me, that means that everywhere's going to have a new normal or a new weather. They call it climate change. I thought that was called weather. Growing up, they told me that was weather. So, yeah, that's kind of my idea of it. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of food shortages, and I know a lot about population plateau. There's another hoax out there that there's overpopulation in the world, and I know that's not the case. It's overpopulation density problems. And I also know that with the new way that people are not producing children to replace themselves, there's going to be a large die-off of elderly people with no young people to replace them in the Western countries.
Because, look how they've indoctrinated people through these last decades here. Oh, you have to do with less. You have to use less. You have to use less. Climate change, global warming. But right behind the scenes, the government's buying 10 to 1 what you're not using, and they're patting you on the back. Thanks for reducing so we could buy more, Get ready for all these changes. I mean, this system that we continue to move for, why don't all advertisements cease, and why don't we stop all imports across the planet? If CO2 is such a extinction level event, if it's really such an extinction level gas, why do we have all these ads on the TV, even running up to this minute? Buy more stuff, get the newest thing, need a new one. Well, no, you don't really. But why do they keep feeding us all this? You need to buy a new car even now. Watch the weekend's football games. If you're into sporting event, how many car truck ads are you going to see on there? Followed up by a CO2 warning label or something on there.
And then think about this concept. They feed the masses this low nutrient, glyphosate-rich food that they have to do weird agriculture to produce large yields. They themselves, with this, I would call it gross farming, I guess, or toxic farming, they themselves, if there was a thing, that we were going to worry about global warming and greenhouse gases, they make it where they need way more land and way more resources to produce the same amount because they want people to eat this low nutritious food, which means they have to eat more and more of it. And then we have all of these obese people that are still lacking all the nutrients they need to be healthy. And you brought that up too about the government buying up stuff. If you remember a couple of years ago, they were buying up all of the storable foods, and they've been doing this for years now. So it's not a new thing or something that they haven't been doing. They've been preparing for something big for quite a while, or at least they've been making sure that you can't prepare.
Yeah, and it also makes me question these shortages that we started talking about in the beginning here of shelves going bare. It's canned goods predominantly, or longer term types of flour, oats, and these types of stuff. Again, are they back at the buying table again, where they're buying so much that it's causing shortages for the general public? Because that's the only possible thing I could think, especially when you're talking about the store shelves coming empty here. TrueLeafMarket.com. I really want to talk about growing your own food, which will be a necessity moving forward. There's so many ways that we can go about growing different types of vegetables that we're going to need. Microgreens are incredibly nutritious. They're super fast to grow. In less than a week, you can have something that you can eat. Also, sprouts. We can get those a little bit taller, a little more dense, a little bit larger volume on the vegetation mass coming off of there. So how do you know what kind of sprouts to grow? How about wheatgrass or herbs? What about different types of herbs that we can add to our foods? Now, what I just described to you, there's a full range of starter guides there at TrueLeafMarket.com for you to take a look at. Even if it's just for your own knowledge and you don't purchase something from them, at least get the information so you know how to grow microgreens, you know how to grow sprouts, you understand what some of the herbs are for. TrueLeafMarket.com. Use the link below and give yourself the gift of organic and heirloom seeds.
Yeah, and that can happen within 2 days. I live in a town out here in the middle of the desert that even the mail, we're 2 days from anything. So if any kind of thing happened that would shut down the infrastructure, people here would be starving within the week. The diabetics would be dying within a week. Things like that. It would be a horrible scenario for people that are worried about the sun burning us up instead of real world needs.
Yeah, you think about medicines too. Okay, food is one thing. But if the supply chain goes down, it's everything. And a lot of people rely on those medicines to get through their day. I try to purposely not take medicine unless I really have to, because I see in the future, what if people can't get their psych meds or whatever? There'd be a lot of psychotic breakdowns and all these types of.
Yeah, I actually think if everybody stopped taking at least the psych meds and stuff, that the world might straighten out a little bit.
Yeah, because how many people are dependent on these substances? And then, what if you're taking something like Lipitor for blood pressure or something for heart aneurysm? This type with these extended lifetimes so they can milk more money from you are going to cease pretty quick if people can't get this basic medicine.
Things like insulin need to be refrigerated. So if the grid goes down and you're diabetic, what do you do if you don't live in a cold area?
Well, we come back to circa 1900 again. Then what did, you're going back in the past to take a look to solve these modern problems. What did people do that were diabetics 100 years ago?
There were less diabetics.
Well, we can now prolong life with the systems that we have. They rely on just-in-time delivery. So if these systems go away, what about kidney dialysis? What if you can't get to the hospital? People live decades longer because of kidney dialysis. And then, if you're waiting in line for a transplant, liver, heart, whatever, you're gone. You look back in history and you see accounts on how people came through the depressions and they were scarred for life. You talked about your grandparents on the farm. I had grandparents too. We went out, we'd go to their farm and, work in the garden every summer. Yeah. But they saved everything. They grew up during the Great Depression. And I remember being at the house, open a drawer and be like full of 1,000 rubber bands and 200 twist ties from the bread at the time. Why are you all saving all this stuff? I don't know if you have the same kind of grandparents.
Yes, my grandmother actually was born in the 30s, so she was growing up right after that really bad spot, and it still wasn't that great then. But yeah, they were penny pinchers, and that's why I know things like a lot of people don't know the terms. Like I've noticed people probably under 40 don't even know what other people are talking about. Speaking of that, I've been getting a lot of questions on several videos because I talk about just-in-time shipping too. And a lot of people don't know what that is. It's a thing that was invented by the Japanese because they had limited space to where that things would just show up exactly when they needed it. But unfortunately, as David was saying, if there's any kind of breakdown in the logistics, they just come to a halt. It just stops. That's the flaw in just-in-time shipping.
That's the Achilles heel of our civilization is the way we set this up. I personally believe that.
Yeah. What are some answers though? Like, a lot of people talk about prepping and we were just getting into what the older generations did, and they wouldn't have a problem with the grid going down or a severe winter or a severe summer. They would have preps ready for that. And they didn't even consider them preps. That was just day-to-day life. But some of the stuff that they used to do, people nowadays would have no idea doing. Like, I don't know how to salt meat and dry meat. If I needed to do that on the spot out in the wilderness or something like that. I noticed that your website here has a lot of videos, articles. I mean, it's just like a treasure trove of information about how to prep. What are some things that you would like to really point out that would be really serious if something like a Carrington event or something like that just happened due to solar changes?
Well, you'd have to learn how to can food at that point again, or I should say, can it. So first of all, how many cans and jars do you have around? How many lids do you have? Do you know how to sterilize the jars? And then if we have a Carrington event, you're going to have to do it by fire.
Yeah.
And smoking. Now you could do a double prong approach to that, because if you're going to be using the wood to create heat to then boil water to do canning, you could set up just like Native American Indians. They had teepee. Why did they have that particular shape? Because then you could direct the smoke up and then smoke meat at the same time, smoke fish. You ever had smoked salmon? Love this stuff. Without electricity, we are really going to go back into the pioneering lifestyle again, where aerial motors, you see out where you're at, especially, I don't even know, do you see aerial motors anymore? It's the windmills out there. They're not generating electricity either for pumping water. A lot of those out there still out in the western part of the U.S.
Most of them I see are just kind of like some Western painting. They're out on somebody's land and they're no longer functioning. But yeah, that's a good point that you brought up, because me and my brother were actually talking about that the other day. Most people don't know what those are. And, like in a Walking Dead survival scenario, that would be actually a thing to go for, is one of those old abandoned water pumps. I mean, you can get water that way if it's not dirtied by all the fracking nearby.
Yeah, and if it's not functional, who has the skill set to repair that? Because when I was up in Pai, Thailand, I was working on an organic farm up there. I had a chance to repair a well with some people. But it took us a full-on excavator to get that thing dislodged and pull out the pipes and change the seal and put it back in. It wasn't an easy task to do that. It took a lot of power, literally machine power and manpower, to get that one little tiny well going back up again. So who has the skills right now to revamp an aerial motor and get that thing pumping again?
Yeah, not too many people. Most of the people I meet that are about 35 or under can't even read a measuring tape. They don't know what the tools are called in a toolbox. It's kind of a scary thing in a bleak future when you know that there's so many people out there that don't know really anything. I wanted to get into this because it may not be the grand solar minimum that people have to worry about. I see some really crazy times coming as far as in the financial market. with things going up and down if Hong Kong can't solve this problem?
So the first things that I would anticipate, and I actually wrote a 6-point envision of what would happen if shots are fired and they're using some tanks to get this thing under control again. The finance would cease, and there would, first of all, if China went in to do that, they would have to stop all internet communications because they couldn't have people, talking to each other about where the soldiers were and where to mass next, etc. So just to wipe out the internet in the largest financial capital in Asia outside of Tokyo and these kind of places, Singapore, you might not have a bank account in HSBC, but your bank does. Your bank, interbank, is going lending and working with these Asian banks. So if you think I'm in the middle of Texas, or, I'm up somewhere in XYZ in Alberta, whatever it might be, I don't have any communication with a Chinese bank or a Hong Kong bank, won't affect me. Oh, yes, it will, because your bank does. And then the second thing, the transshipping going through that place would instantly stop. There would be a lockup at the ports for weeks, if not months, to try to get all the offices would close. People would just leave. Now, how are you supposed to get freight forwarding if your offices are all closed? And dock workers sure aren't going to be out there. Where are they going to transship? Transship is basically where you take outbound cargo and you put it on a different kind of ship and then reconsolidate it at a further point, like Kaohsiung in Taipei or down in Singapore. There's larger vessels waiting to go over the Pacific to another place. So some of these more regional runs, if you will, from Hong Kong to Taipei or Hong Kong up to Tokyo, something like this, these are smaller vessels. They're not open ocean trans-Pacific. So they have to get reloaded somewhere else. So part of Hong Kong's duties is that as well. They have huge ocean-going vessels. So think about something from Vietnam or Thailand comes in there, enter Asia, and then gets on a larger vessel and gets sent out. They don't have boats just leaving from Bangkok that have 100% Thai goods heading over to America. That's going to get disrupted. But what's coming, all of Asia is going to get disrupted. That's the whole thing. Asian finance will be disrupted. Asian shipping will be disrupted. But an enormous amount of stuff comes from Asia back to the U.S. You might not know what comes until it disappears. And you'd be like, that was from there? I didn't know that. And how long is it going to be until we get it back online again? 1-2 months? But by that time, the panic shortages will have swept through in the first couple of weeks. And then you'll really see what barbarians humans can become.